But first, I would like to thank you all for having me here. The university has been an incredible host to me, and I'm extremely thankful for all of the people who worked so hard to bring me here and to support this exhibition, which took, if you look at my Instagram, you'll see many videos, many pictures of the installation and all the people it took and all the time it took to create the installation that we're going to get to go see after this. I'd like to thank the Edwina and Charles Milner Award. That award is so important, and some of you, I'm sure, are artists in this room, and you know how important it is to be funded for your work. So that funding really helped me to be able to bring this show to you all today. And I'm very thankful to Alexandra Tager for having this program and for supporting it, for Faye McHelmett, for Chalo Weber. They were part of the group that chose me to come. And for Michael Acosta, who helped me very much with the video. You'll see there's a video installation, and he troubleshooted and worked with us with complicated things in order to make that work. And Charlie and Ashley, who worked very hard, the gallery assistants, to help support this project. And last but not least, Jill Winburn, who has been amazing. I have explained about her to every person I know, all of my artist friends, and they're like, please introduce me to her, please introduce me to her. So she's just incredible. She's supported this exhibition and has helped me with every single aspect, and she's phenomenal. So you really have an asset of having her as a director here with your program. Yay, Jill! So I'm going to start all the way in the 70s, and then we'll get up to today. So I'm going to take you on a little bit of a journey. But the reason why I'm taking you back is because as artists, our motivation or the reasons why we commit ourselves to this kind of a life and we think about the way that we are in the world has been very much influenced from our upbringing, whether or not we're aware of it or not. And I'm very interested in nurture or nature, right? Why do we become the people we are? Why do we find meaning in the things that we find meaning for? And so I like to talk about those beginnings for me and my motivations. And that is that my father was an artist. He still is an artist. He's a printmaking professor. And so art supplies were always around when I was a child. He had his studio in our home. And so I always saw him creating work, and he would sit with me, and I would play and draw in his sketchbook and sketchbooks. And that was kind of the first way that I learned how to understand the world. It was through this kind of visual way. I wasn't the best communicator when I was young, very shy. And so I really felt like art was the way that I could express and connect with the rest of the world. And that's because I was shown that at a very early age. So these are my parents. And they met in Ethiopia in the 60s. They were in the Peace Corps. They came from two very different cultures, religions. They spoke different languages in their homes. They were very different. One was from the East Coast, one was from the West Coast. And they met, and then they moved to New Mexico. And they're highly influential in the way that I understand the world and think about the world. We traveled a lot. We lived in Mexico for a while, in Oaxaca. And they really instilled this idea of traveling and meeting other people and understanding other cultures and accepting people and being connected with a wider world. And so one of my degrees is in cultural anthropology, because I was very interested in how we create meaning and how we make sense of the world. And I have this quote, which I really love, which is, as soon as you're born, you are given a name, a religion, a nationality, a race, and you spend the rest of your life defending a fictional identity. I think it's very interesting because sometimes we go about our lives and we think we're making decisions based on something that has not been influenced by something else, etc. So I'm so interested in why we make decisions and why we associate meaning with things, and what just growing up in one zip code can change your entire life versus in a different zip code or across the world, right? So this is my artist statement, and I'm going to read this to you. My work is about the investigation and how we interpret, construct, and negotiate our worlds. The major themes of my work are about the connections we make with one another, how we culturally negotiate space and self, rites of passage, and ideas of transformation and liberation. And those of you who are art majors, you know that writing your artist statement, you have to do that all the time, and you're constantly changing it. So my artist statement for each body of work is a little different, but this kind of encompasses all of the kind of trajectory and themes in my work. So This is one of my very early pieces from the 1990s, my BFA work. But I'm showing this to you because there's a long kind of history that all connects at the end with my work. I was very interested in female portraiture with very large portraiture. I was very interested in the male gaze and how we live in a patriarchal society, a consumerist society, a capitalist society, what all that means for women and the inner self of women. And so I did a lot of portraits. I also have another minor in women's studies. I'm very interested in these concepts. But as my work changed, I started adding anthropomorphism to animals to kind of be stand-ins for humans. So I start to kind of transition from portraiture into animals and more symbolic imagery in my work. And by the time I graduate with my graduate degree, my MFA, I kind of completely moved into these psychological spaces and these objects. At the time, I had a young child at home and I was going through grad school. And for those of you who have gone through grad art school, you know, or any school, you know how complicated it is when you are responsible to somebody else, especially a child. And I was trying to understand this new role in my life, and I could no longer paint in oil paint on these large canvases. It just was not practical for my life, and I felt very fragmented. And so a lot of my work starts to become very fragmented because I could make one piece of work very quickly with my child in the room, and then I can move on to the next. And if I put those all together, I had something. And it was also a sense of control, but this completely transformed my practice because it meant that I could be very productive, but all these things could kind of come together. This is just another shot of that installation, just to show you all these little objects. And so this is 2011, and you're going to see when you walk into the gallery in 2022 that these same images reappear in a different kind of form. So I'm very interested in repetition. I'm very interested in how we go about our lives and say, in my city there is a street called El Paseo, and I calculated how many times I've driven down that street and what I think about every time I drive down that street, how things change. It's the same objects, but how am I changing in relationship to them? And this is kind of symbolic of the work that I do. So I started getting interested in gender roles during Victorian times. During Victorian times, gender roles became very sharply acute. There was a very big distinction between men and women. And there was a lot of, I was pulling a lot from florals and wallpaper, and I was trying to create my work that was reflective of the psychological space, but that you would enter an installation where there would be wallpaper on the wall. So you would kind of be inside of these rooms, and you would be able to have this kind of relationship with the work. But then I started drawing on the walls instead. So I started pulling out objects that were within the iconography of the paintings. And then I started creating them on a larger scale and moving them in different scales all across the room in these installations. Here's a close-up. So you can kind of see there's still this negative space because I'm really interested in it being a psychological space. So when you enter these installations, it becomes this place where you are being pulled into the painting. I was trained as a painter. I'm very into drawing and paper and two-dimensional objects. I just love that, and I love going into museums and going into shows and being kind of sucked into the painting. So this is my way of trying to kind of really pull people into the work and have people have a moment with it. And at this time, I was adjuncting at 3 different schools in 2 states, and I was really noticing how devalued art was. And so part of this was kind of the catalyst for that was, how do you pull people in and have people have a relationship with the work so they really start to value what it is to look at work and what it is to be an artist? So can everybody see that color? And so what I want you to do is just kind of think about how that color makes you feel, and just kind of think about it to yourself. But this specific color is called Baker Miller pink. And Baker Miller pink is a very specified color. So color is, it's really, when we're seeing, like, for instance, an apple, we're not actually seeing the red of the apple, we're seeing everything reflected back to our eye. So light acts much differently than pigment, right? But this specific Baker Miller pink, they figured out that if you paint an entire room with this Baker Miller pink, it calms people down. And so this was a practice they used to do in what were called drunk tanks or in asylums, when they really needed to calm somebody down who was having a very kind of, aggressive episode, or they were very upset or belligerent, and they would put them in these rooms, and it would instantly calm them down. And so there was a football coach in Iowa in the 1980s who read about this psychological study, and he had a game, and I can never remember the game, and people always ask me the game, but I don't know what it is, but you could probably Google it. But they were the major underdog, so he had read this study, and he decided to paint the opposing team's locker room this pink. They won by a landslide, and they won so much that the NFL, I guess that's what it's probably called, outdated, like, you cannot never do that again. They outlawed doing this because of the psychological element of that. So I was so interested in this idea of color and how color can have this effect on us, right? Like when we go into a fast food restaurant and things are red, it's because they know that red will make us eat more. We will eat more if we see red. So how is color being used? How is it being used in our environments that we're not necessarily aware of? So I was really interested in changing these installations and creating kind of the same iconography, adding more pieces, but changing the color. And how does that change the entire feeling of these installations? And so again, I'm drawing on the walls. And then I was also really interested in my relationship with my child, and I was really grappling with what it was to be a full-time artist and teach and be a mother. And so my child was always in my studio, and if you have children, you know that they always want to be right next to you all the time, right? So he was making his drawings, and I was making my drawings, and I decided to start to put those two things together with Mylar. I started getting really interested in Mylar, and you're going to see Mylar in this show. Just the way that it feels. It's used a lot in architecture, and it's also used a lot in printmaking, but it's kind of like this frosted, sheeny kind of plastic, but we'll take marker, and so it's kind of see-through and kind of not. And so I would place his paintings underneath, and then I would place mine on top with spaces so that his would come through. And so I really love this idea of layering and how you can kind of see these layers come through of place. And at the time, I was married to an archaeologist, and we had an archaeological company, a CRM company. And what you had to do was physically walk different areas of Texas and New Mexico and look for archaeological remains. And so he had all these topographical maps, and then there were places that we had physically walked. And so I started using maps and abstracting the maps and my child's drawings and my own drawings and putting those all together into these pieces. And then I started placing those inside of different installations in different colors with some new iconography. And then I started moving away from squares and rectangles, and I was really interested in circles and ovals, and how do you kind of push past that sphere, you know, that golden section, that perfect rectangle that we're looking at right now, that business cards are, that pieces of paper are. We're so used to seeing that in our visual vernacular that I wanted to kind of push out into these ovals and these circles, because I just felt like I wasn't fitting into roles. I wasn't really an artist like some of my colleagues who didn't have other responsibilities. I wasn't really like all the other educators. I still had to do all these other things. I wasn't like all the other mothers. So I was really feeling like I needed to provide that kind of existential, those issues and those ways of kind of breaking through in my own work. And so I started trying to go even bigger and trying to encompass these larger spaces. This is the largest continuous gallery wall in all of Kentucky at Georgetown College. But I was actually a little disappointed when I got there because I didn't realize that this stopped. I really wanted you to be in this entire purple space. But I wanted to push the work a lot larger, and so it really becomes this place that you enter into, this kind of installation. And that's because, here's another picture. I thought I was ahead of myself. This is a close-up. And the reason being is I had gone to this show, and I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but seeing an artist's work will kind of change the trajectory of your life. One of my closest friends, she's an artist in New York City, and I came to visit her, and she said, I'm going to take you to this show. And we do this thing where she doesn't tell me what we're going to do, and then she kind of surprises me. So we went to the Guggenheim, which I've gone to many different times before, and this is what it looks like if you're not familiar. And who we saw was James Turrell. And I was just blown away because he had completely transformed the space. And it was all about colored light. And the color light changed over time. So you could sit there on the bottom and watch this colored light as it just, that was it. That was it for the exhibition. And these are the Instagram photos I took during that time. This is 2015 or 2013. But what I was so moved about was all of these people just took it upon themselves to just lay down on the floor. That was not part of his installation. That was not what he thought people would do. But all of these people from all over the world, New Yorkers, right, laying down on this dirty floor just to have this experience with the work. And I was so moved by it. And I was so moved by this color. And I found out later that I have synesthesia as well. So there's a whole combination of things that were happening for me, but this was such a monumentous kind of experience for me, and I thought, how can I do that in my work? How can I pull in color into my work? I'm very interested in the flatness and the painting, and those are so important to me in my relationship with my paintings. But how do I create these installations where all of these things kind of work together? And so I started using colored light. And this is an exhibition in Juarez in Mexico. And what was wonderful about this space was that the light, there was only one window, so I could really kind of control the light in the room. So as the light changed from these windows, so too did the exhibition. And so I'm using the iconography from the paintings, and I'm outlining them, and then I'm blowing them up on the wall. So it's the same iconography that you're seeing in the work. And the work, with the shadows, it created all these different kinds of shadows from the lights, colored shadows, and so I have the square and I have the circles, and I have all these things working together. In some parts, the wall is painted, and in some parts it is not. But as the light changed, it got darker in the space, and this is the first time I started to introduce video in my work as well. So there's a projection of the iconography that's on the wall, and it's moving around in the exhibition space. And this is a clip of the short of that. So this is the iconography that's kind of moving and coalescing together in the video. And then I also had another pivotal experience where I was the artist in residence for the Charles Adams Studio Project, which is an amazing place. If you don't know about it, look it up. It's pretty close to here, so it would be a great opportunity to be an artist there. And what worked out for me just beautifully is they allowed me to bring my son. And when I was touring Texas Tech, which is a university there, the head of the department just so happened to be good friends with one of my best friends. And they had a laser cutter, and I was just kind of swooning over this laser cutter, and I was like, oh my God, you guys have a laser cutter? And she said, why don't you come in and use it? So I was like, I'm going to use it every day. And every day from 8 to 5, I came in and I used this laser cutter. I learned how to use it, and then I would go back to the studio and work. But what was so interesting was that I was able to take all of these drawings that I had made, and I made more and more drawings of my paintings. I was able to create those in the computer as SVGs and modify them and put them into this laser cutter and cut them out of wood. And it was just an incredible experience, and I started painting them as well, because I could physically have these cutouts of my paintings. And so this was just a really exciting change for me. And I could in real time, create my painting, create a tracing of this painting, put it in a video, and then also make a silhouette cutout of it as well in wood. And so I was trying to figure out how to use these silhouettes and how to kind of push this idea of an installation and pushing these objects. So now I've made all these objects. Like, what am I going to do with all these objects? I'm not trained as a 3D person. I didn't think of myself as 3D. So I'm working in this kind of field that felt a little foreign, and I was trying to figure out how I wanted to incorporate those into the work and into my installations. So I have my circle work with the same iconography that are in these, and I would also incorporate them. This is at the El Paso Museum of Art, kind of flying out of the actual pieces, so the shapes are kind of coming out, for instance, in this installation. This is a close-up. And then I also silhouetted a lot of these images on different pieces. But then I started incorporating more light, and so some of these were painted, and they would hang and they would move around, and you would have shadows. And there was also all of this different kind of colored light, so that when you stood in installation, you're also kind of part of the installation, and your shadow was within these other shadows of the floating pieces. And then I decided to start making my pieces even bigger. It was really important to me to kind of extend them so that they became more of a story and a narrative instead of kind of like a quick narrative. And then I started creating the silhouettes to kind of fly out of the pieces. So you have the pieces and they start to kind of create this sense of movement because they're on these circles and they're kind of crashing into the pieces and then flying back out. This is just another close-up of this show at UNM Gallup. And then I started working with a lot of light reflective paint. And so in this image, this is another exhibition where the lighting, the colored light is projected onto the pieces. They have light-sensitive paint, and then as the light changes, the light will change in the room. So this is it during the daytime with the pieces kind of flying out. And this is as dusk is happening, and here's some of these mylar pieces that have been cut out as well. And here are some more of those mylar. And so the color changes, and there are colored shadows that happen outside of the pieces, and they also glow in the dark. And people also had little flashlights like you'll have today for this exhibition, where you can go and find all of the light reflective paint and all the different layers that will also appear to you in each one of the pieces. And my idea is that I want people to be able to have these kinds of intimate relationships with the pieces, where you are able to kind of see your own narrative and your own story. You're seeing this iconography repeated in many different ways. And how does that relate to you and your story and what you are seeing being presented to you? And so after this exhibition, these are just some pictures that I pulled from Instagram from people who had posted these pictures. It was really clear to me that I was so excited about the reactions of people in these installations. I kind of stood in the middle of the room, and there wasn't an artist talk associated with it. Nobody knew who I was, and I just got to hear people talk about the work, and it was just so incredible and how they were relating to it. And so I became really interested in relational art, which is new, and that is the goal to create a social circumstance. The viewer's experience of the constructed social environment becomes the art. And so I started to try to push that mylar a little bit more and create more acrylic. Acrylic is another word for plexiglass, but there's also acrylic, which is the synthetic polymer paint. So I'll go back and forth talking about acrylic, but plexiglass is like the Kleenex term for tissue, right? So there's plexiglass in here, and there's mylar as well. And then these would create their own kind of 4 or 5 different kinds of shadows. And then one of my last shows before COVID was at Colorado State University. And in this exhibition, I completely transformed all of the lights with these light gels so that all the light that was coming through was colored light. And this is one of the pieces from that show. And again, the pieces would be different inside of this colored light, and they look much different with clear light, but they also glow, and you're able to look at them in the exhibition. And this is more from that exhibition. And I also started using projection mapping. I started working with the UTEP electromagnetic lab, actually with the artist Laura Turan, who helped me kind of develop this video. And what it is the video is projected onto the shapes. So only these mylar shapes that are coming out from the wall have the video projected on them. And so the video just runs on the actual pieces. And this is what it looks like standing up. But we have our own installation of this in a different iteration in the gallery. But after that, I had a show I had an installation with Sharbani Dasgupta, who was talking about, in some of her work, about climate change and about this idea of how we try to create and hold on to our ideas of what is beautiful and nature. And well, that's what I inferred in these small plexiglass pieces, where I kind of wanted to encapsulate these birds so that they were kind of sitting inside of this plastic form They are beautiful. They look a little upset as well by being kind of encapsulated. But it's this idea about nature, and our relationship with the environment. And we honor it, we love it, but we also do not take good care of it as well. And so I made many of these pieces, many of these birds, starlings in this exhibition, because I've been really interested in birds all the way back, going back to 2009 and 2010 and some of these pieces. But what I found was interesting when I started thinking about my work was that I had these starlings a long time ago. And I was really interested in them because they have murmurations where they really actually talk to each other, they communicate, and they create these different kinds of forms. And they can make them into birds. I don't know if you guys have ever seen this, but I just thought that was incredibly extraordinary. That they can kind of move into these shapes. And this is another one taking flight. And this is called swarm behavior. And a lot of ants do this, bees do this, bacteria does this, bacteria in our bodies does this, cancer can do this, where it kind of talks to each other without having that kind of, actual language. And they're actually using swarm behavior to start to work on AI and different ways that artificial intelligence will kind of come into our worlds. And so I'm very interested in the way that we are interconnected and we think we are apart, but collective consciousness, all of these things are very important to me in my interests in my work. And so using that as an inspiration and using my imagery, I started building up more and more of my iconography, and these are more different kinds of light videos. But I just wanted to show you this piece really quickly because this becomes, a silk screen becomes, a video, but it's also in here. I don't know where he is, but he's somewhere in there. I can't see him, but I'm sure you can probably see him. But you'll start to notice, I pulled this guy out because you'll start to notice him a little bit more, but all this imagery all the way 20 years back has been built upon and built upon and built upon. So it's the same kind of images in different iterations, different scales, and in different kinds of ways and connections to one another, like some of these. And then with those small birds, they really started to ignite this idea of what if we make these kinds of microcosm, these kinds of petri dishes of places that we could kind of coexist in. And I started this work before COVID, but as COVID kind of advanced, it became more and more clear to me that this was a way to kind of circumvent the kind of pieces I was making before, which are very labor intensive. There's hundreds and hundreds of layers. And these were a little bit faster. It's silkscreen, it's spray paint, and it's drawing on top of them. But they were also so joyous to me. There were a lot about hope, and at the time I was looking up bugs that I had never seen before. I don't have an image of one, but they're translucent or they're hot pink. All these things exist in the world that we're not necessarily aware of. And to me, that was how I was trying to frame this whole idea of COVID and our worlds and how we recreate our worlds when there's so much chaos and uncertainty. And how do you create your own kind of beauty and encapsulate that? And so I just kept going a little bit bigger and bigger. And these three pieces, when placed together, a lot of the pieces, once they come together, they become even more layered. And they have glow-in-the-dark spray paint and reactive paint. And what was also really interesting to me is that they created these shadows. So now they have this kind of multiplicity where they're starting to be a lot more layered. And the piece I'm showing you here, this is a piece in the show. And this is another piece in the show. And if I cover up part of it, what starts to kind of eke out. But what's so interesting to me is this iconography is kind of the same. It's like 200 of these different iconographies, but all placed together in different kinds of ways, look completely different. And when they're more paced further apart in the negative space, how does that create a shadow? And how does that relate? These also, the green part glows in the dark. And then if you add color, then what happens when you add color to this kind of see-through piece? This is another piece in the show. So then I really wanted to have them have this kind of sense of movement. So if I place the birds here, and I start to place these silhouettes, and now they're in plexiglass. These silhouettes are in plexiglass, and they kind of fly out. How can I create more of this kind of movement? And then if we add light, what starts to happen is that the fluorescents start to become reactive with this blue light from the ceiling, and the glowing aspect of them starts to really pull out. And I just wanted to show you this really quick because this is one of the silhouettes, but if you look here, it really has its start way back when I'm very interested in home, how we create home, how we assign meaning, and gender roles. And so all of these silhouettes have now been, they've been silk screened and spray painted, and with a little bit of marker, and then all placed together. And then this is called murmuration, and they kind of come out from the bottom, and then they start to move around the entire room with the color. So I'm just showing you some pictures of the installation that's over at the McRae. And then this is the video installation I showed you before, but now it's much brighter. It's red, so that it works with the light inside of the installation. This is my favorite picture. You got red, you got purple. Purple creates this sense of creativity in us that we're maybe not necessarily aware of, but part of this exhibition is this way of trying to transmit joy, trying to transmit hope, and trying to transmit all these things. Even if you're not aware of it, the color's kind of prodding you there while you're inside of the exhibition. And that was the end. This is a QR code to see more about the work if you want. But we also have this over at the gallery. And that's it for me. So I'm happy to answer any questions you have about the work. Thank you. Thank you so much. You started in the 70s and you got to 2022, so you went on a long ride. So thank you. Does anybody have any questions? Yes?
You shared a color combination at the end that you really love.
Yes.
Can you relate to a color combination that you have a hard time with?
Sorry?
Is there a color combination that you have a hard time working with?
No. No. It's like saying, do you have a child you like more than the other? You know? Color is, I love color, and I didn't realize why I loved it so much, but I found out I had synesthesia because if you have and I have the fourth cone in my eye. I don't know if you guys have heard of that, but if you have I have a grandparent who's colorblind. If you have a male grandparent who's colorblind, then you will, only if you're female, you can have this fourth cone where you can see millions more colors than the average person. So that's really exciting, but this is my favorite part of that, is that they actually found these studies that the only time they found it in males, because you cannot be born with it if you're male, is in landscape painters, in male landscape painters. And the reasoning is because they're staring so much and they're looking at colors so much that they start to see more color. So really, the fourth cone is possible for everyone. It's just about looking and seeing, and it just makes your eyes see more color. So I guess I didn't answer your question, but I love color, and I find that even anything that looks kind of ugly is, you know, you can just add like a little neon green or something, and you can tweak it, and it's perfect, right? But yeah.
We have a Zoom question.
Okay.
Someone wants to know if you can explain more about your synesthesia.
Okay. I think I kind of did just now. Well, synesthesia is different for everybody, but I think there's a large amount of the population who has it, and you can have it in all different kinds of ways. So you can have it not necessarily with color. You can have it with sound. Some people see sound in colors. I tend to see a lot of things in colors. I see people in colors. I see memories in colors. But there's like 76 different ways you can have it, and then they're like all combined together. So you might actually have part of it, but my synesthesia has a lot to do with color and color memory. So when somebody's talking about something, I'll remember a conversation, I'll be like, that was a blue-green conversation, you know, like, but it had a little tweak of black on the end or whatever, and I'll think about people in terms of color, and especially a lot of my artist friends, I think about them in the colors that I associate with their work. So I hope that's helpful. Yeah.
I thought it was really interesting how you work with your son in some collaborative sense. Do you still work with him, and do you hope to grow that?
Oh yes, I hope to forever. I'm always telling him, I'm like, we're gonna open up a company where we make skateboard. He's a skateboarder, so I've been doing skateboards. But his drawings are, I don't know if they're in, shown you here, but in my, no, none of his screen prints are in this exhibition, but they are in an exhibition before this that I didn't show you. I've had his drawings are placed on top of my drawings, and I have a series called, it's a monochromatic series, and so his drawings and my drawings are placed black on black. I have some of those on my Instagram. I don't have those yet on my my website because I like I don't know how to incorporate them where they don't look so apparent. They are in, actually no, that's not true. They're in 2 of my colored pieces that are in my studio right now. So yeah, a lot of his imagery is still in my work. He has influenced everything I've done in my work. I mean, my work has always been dependent on him. When I was applying for grad school, I didn't have a studio, I just had a toolbox, and I would cut up pieces of paper, and wherever he was, I would just open up my toolbox and work where he was. So every way that I've worked is around him. I'm a single mother now, so it's highly important that I have to be super flexible. My studio is always in my home. I have to work with non-toxic materials, and I get his advice on everything. Do you like that? Is that cool? and usually if he says, oh, that's really cool, I'm like, I'm on to something, right? Because it's the biggest compliment. Yeah.
We have another Zoom question.
Sure.
How did you sift through your materials for quality and longevity?
How do I sift through my materials for quality and longevity? Well, everything is, there's a term called dead on paper, and now I can't remember the other term. What is that term? It starts with an A. My spray paint is, it's all archival. That's the word I'm looking for. The spray paint's archival. Everything's archival that I use. So that these will last they're color fast, so they'll last for a long time. And in fact, my larger wood ones, I have a museum quality archival material that I put over that's matte, but it also seals it in. So I don't know if I answered that question. How do I pick them? How do I pick the materials, or do I pick them for longevity? Was that the question?
I think you answered the question.
Okay, cool. All right.
Another one is, when did textiles in your coloring book come into play with your work?
Well, we actually have this for sale over at the gallery, but I love textiles, and I love the fact that people can wear somebody else's art. So that's kind of like one of the next iterations I really want to do, is I want to make, and I make my own, like I screen print my own clothes and stuff like that. But I would love to have, my work out in the world so that other people are wearing the iconography. That would be pretty incredible. So, coloring book, I have a child. So I thought it would be like a fun way. I have all this imagery, and how to put all that imagery together to create something where other people can physically be interacting with the work. So to me, the coloring book is about having another relationship with somebody watching the work, but being a part of the work. I have like 100 other slides that I did not show you guys, so I did happen to have that really close. That was not planned. I just had to edit because I gave you a lot. Are there any other questions?
I have more Zoom questions.
Okay.
How did your printmaking background shape what you do now?
Well, I was never really formally taught printmaking. I just was an apprentice for my dad. My dad always had us like holding the plates and moving them through the presses, and so excuse me, I was around printmaking all the time, and then he would take us. I thought everybody, when they went on vacation, they just went to museums and were lectured about printmaking and painting. Like, I thought that's what people did. But that's not apparently what people get to do on vacation. So I learned a lot about printmaking. I learned a lot about the preciseness and really trying to kind of honor that line making and starting to see that line. And so I'm just kind of obsessed with seeing it and trying to create, you know, this kind of line work that's, to me, really beautiful. That's what I love to look at when I go into a museum is line work. But it's all because of my dad, so he made me the way I am. It's that influence. But I think it shows up in the line work and a lot of the pieces, and in screen printing, the thinness of the lines and you know, the negative and the positive space.
What are some of your favorite artists that you draw inspiration from?
Kara Walker, forever. She's amazing. I saw one of her shows, and I can't remember the first time I saw it, but I was blown away by her negative space. And then, you know, in one of her pieces, she just had one of those, they used to use them in school, you know, it's like a little projection thing with like a little gel on it projected on the wall. It was so simple and beautiful, and it just had a little bit of color. And I was just, from then on, I was just hooked with everything she's done. The way she uses negative space is just gorgeous, like, and her line work, but, yeah.
How do you refuel to balance your creative process in your life?
That's a good question. I try to work really hard at it. I do transcendental meditation. I can't say enough good things about that. That helps me a lot. And I try to hike as much as possible, because being outside, I have found, COVID taught me this, like, can change everything. It completely kind of refreshes me, but it's a really hard balance to do all the things. I also, I teach full time. I'm on a couple boards, direct, and so a lot of nonprofit work, and I also have a business wearing all the hats that I co-teach with Kaylin Butine. It's a professional practice course, and then I also exhibit my work and sell my work and all that good stuff, and I'm also a parent. So I try to do wear all the hats, do all the things with balance. Friends, getting to talk to people about what I'm going through is very helpful. Any other questions?
When you enter a gallery space, how do you start planning the way your pieces are going to lay out, like filling that space?
Well, space just tells me what it's supposed to do. So, like, before coming here for this exhibition, I had, you know, I had the floor plan. I had some ideas. I had taken picture and video. I kept trying to visualize it. But, you know, it all goes out the window. As soon as you get to the space tells you how that's supposed to look and where things are supposed to go. So I just keep walking through and imagining how somebody entering the space would feel and how things would organically be able to be seen better. And so that's how I kind of organize the artwork.
I have a question from me.
Okay.
As a BFA student, but also a graphic design student, how would you say those two worlds kind of come together for you?
Well, you know, when I went to school, there was just this total hierarchy system of, like, the graphic designers were in this other part, and they're commercial artists, and they're, like, not real artists, but you know, like, it was just this weird thing. And you can't make art that people are going to buy. Like, that was just so taboo, which is just so, like, who can live like that unless you're independently wealthy supporting your art career, but then we're only having a certain kind of voice that we always hear, right? So I think that, to me, those worlds have really kind of moved together. Those distinctions, they move in and out of each other. I do a lot of graphic design and a lot of the things I have to do just as a professional artist. And I also think the power of that in understanding space and composition, you know, as an artist, those things are interchangeable. So I was taught they were very separate, but to me, they coexist together. And they can, and they're so fluid. Things are so fluid now, and I just don't feel like when I was going to school that was really the idea, that these things could exist all together, and you can make up a new thing where it's like a graphic design painter, you know, like all these things are now so open to us. Have any other questions? Yeah.
What's the connection to the glow in the dark paint? I mean, I love it.
Yeah.
So, like, is there something
Oh,
Like nighttime, like feeling
yeah,
different light.
I'll show you when it happened. And it's gonna not be, it was this guy's shoes that started the whole thing for me. It was this guy's shoes and the Guggenheim. I was like, oh my God, but it could also glow. What if it glowed? And so to me, it becomes this other kind of, I was gonna get to it, but I didn't realize how much I have given you. It's a lot. Thank you guys for sitting here with me today. We're way back there. I think I talk about it here. Yeah. So, I was laying down on the floor and I was like, oh my God, what if I made work that glowed? Like, what if things could glow? And, fireflies, and there's this kind of moss and that glows, and I can't remember the name of it, but animals also have it where they glow. And animals also have night shine with their eyes that can kind of glow if you place a light on it. And to me, that's so interesting how there could be this this other way to kind of engage with the world. And I liked it as a secret, like as a gift. Because to me, all art is a gift, right? Like artists make it, we're putting it out in the world, we want other people to have this relationship with it. And if you can make it glow in the dark, there's this kind of undercurrent that you don't see, but then all of a sudden you could see it. It's kind of like an added gift. So that's how I thought about it for the glow in the dark. Guys, that's really good questions. Do you have any other questions?
Has COVID changed the way that people relate to your work and seem to experience it?
Well, this is my first, oh, that's not true. That's not true. I was just at an exhibition in Indiana. But this is my first solo exhibition since COVID. And I don't know. I don't know what that's going to be like. I've been showing a lot of my process on Instagram and interacting with people that way. But, there's something about people getting to experience the work. Like right now, all I'm thinking about is like when we're all going to be in there together. Because it's so exciting to me to get to share work in person and get to see work in person. I've gone to very few museums in the past couple years. But there's nothing that can really stand in the same place as seeing work in person, right? This is a challenge when we teach art history as an art educator. It's like I can show you, this work, but until you're sitting there and seeing it, it's going to be so different. So, yeah. Yeah.
What was your emotion the first time that you had, like, to put your work out there, to throw your baby out there?
Oh, well, I think after grad school, I had my first, so you're showing work all during your BFA and your MFA. But after my MFA, I felt like that was kind of like official, like I was an official artist. I had my terminal degree, like now. So my first solo exhibition after that was really like, I felt really raw because I felt like, oh, now I'm supposed to know what I'm doing. Like before I had the excuse, I'm just a student, like I'm trying to figure it out. So my first exhibition was really, really raw in that way, but I just saw people like loving the work and just interacting with it, and that just fueled me so much. And sometimes when I'm in the studio and I feel like, oh my God, I'm messing up this painting, and I'm like, nobody knows what it's supposed to look like, right? Like only I know that's messed up, but that's just my language, And so I think that it's really hard to put yourself out into the world, but good or bad, the bad stuff is just helpful to kind of think about and to propel your work. And that's why critique is so important to artists, right? To get that valuable information. I was very lucky. Before I gave this talk, I showed the work to a group of women that are artists that we do critiques with our work, and they said all this stuff, and I was like, oh my God, like it was great. It was what I needed is constructive criticism, but I'm like, oh, the work could be doing this and could be doing this and this and this. So it's just super helpful because and it's also exciting. Like there's always a place to go, right? Like you're never done. There's always another thing you can do, and like, how many other people can say that when they're not in that artist's life, So that's what's exciting to me about art. It's this gift, it's you, but it's also like, if you don't like it, I'm not your cup of tea, like I'm not for you. That's fine. You know, we don't love everybody, so. But yeah, I would just encourage you to put your work out there because it helps. You know, the more and more you put your work out, the more you start to see that relationship a little bit more fractured, a little bit different, you know, more objectively. Like we can be objective, but we can try, right? It's a great question. Yeah?
So you have a lot of nature in your workout. I mean, were you like exposed early on, like a lot of nature, like in your like when you were younger, or did you learn to find it, appreciate it whenever you were older?
I think both. You know, when we were kids, my parents were, so my dad's an artist, right? We didn't have TV. So, and so my parents, and there were 4 of us, and they would say, go outside and you can come back, you know, like when the sun goes down. So I don't think you can do that now. Like I would not do that to my son. They were like, go roam with the other kids, you know, like have at it. So I would play in the dirt a lot. You know, I would play outside. I would lay down in the trees. I would lay down on, there was this kind of like clover like grass in our house, and I would just lay down and just watch the sky and watch ants. And so there was a lot of quietness that I feel like I'm so removed from now. That was such a different way to relate to the world, and it helped me so much. It was so important to the way that I kind of have understood myself and understood the world. And I feel like now I'm always trying to go back to that, like how do you create space to be bored and just have time outside and just kind of discover things. I think about so many things when I'm in the shower, and it's because this is finally the time where I can kind of decompress. So I'm trying to incorporate a lot more hiking so that I'm outside. I listen to podcasts, and then there's like after an hour, like I listen to things, I talk to the friends, I do the thing, and then I'm like, no, everything's shut off. I'm just out here for an hour, and I'm just gonna kind of hear things. I'm gonna hear the birds instead of like looking at my phone or listening to something. So it's become a lot more of a conscious action as I've gotten older. But as a child, it was just kind of like, that's what you did in the 80s in New Mexico, right? I don't know, maybe that was the case for some of you as well, growing up. Are there any other questions? Yeah?
How about ever using the refraction of light in any of your exhibitions?
Have I ever used refraction of light? You mean like it coming back at you?
I guess kind of like the effect of you have kind of like a glass kind of cut crystal and you shine light through it.
Oh, and then it kind of breaks out? No, but I am obsessed with those because there's something so interesting. You know, somebody will have something in their house and I'm like a cat. I'm like, oh my God, what is that in the corner? But I haven't, but that is something I'm thinking about and working with like fluorescent colored plexiglass and trying to make it kind of have more of this kind of bursting out. But yeah, I'm not there yet, but I want to be. And I think it's a great idea. Any other questions? Okay. You guys were really good with questions. I'm super excited. I just want to see you in that space if you have time. I think it would be great to go check it out. And I think there are some refreshments to reward you for your efforts of going there. So that we can go and see this space. So there's little flashlights there. You can use the flashlights to kind of have your own experience. And I'll get to see you over there if you think of any questions or just didn't want to ask in front of everybody else. So thank you so much. Thank you.